Hello, everyone, and welcome to this brief talk on DAO Incorporation and legal issues. My name is Adam Miller, and I won't go through my whole background, but you can see some highlights here and maybe some of your favorite Web 1 and Web 2 tools that were also my favorite. Right now, what I do is I'm a co-founder of MyDAO, which I'll talk a little bit more about later. We focus on DAO legal and regulatory frameworks. I'm also the host of the Just DAO It podcast for people starting DAOs. So please come check out Just DAO It if you are interested. First of all, let's level set on what is a DAO. Now, everyone has a different definition, and that's fine. I'm going to give what I believe is a good legal technical definition of a DAO, which is that it's any organization that's using the blockchain for one or more of these three things: membership tracking, governance, or treasury management, right? You track your membership through some kind of token or smart contract or equivalent. You do your governance on-chain or cryptographically, and you manage your treasury on-chain. And not all DAOs do all these things or do them yet, and that's fine. If someone believes they're a DAO, they're a DAO as far as I'm concerned. And obviously, there's a whole social side of things too, right? Like, what does it mean now that we can use these things, these tools, these technologies? What does that mean for how we can run organizations much more democratically, potentially with less hierarchy, different structures, et cetera? But I think from a legal perspective, this is what's important to keep in mind. So just very briefly, why does this matter? I'll just summarize my view, which is that DAOs are organizations that are as easy to create as websites and scale at internet speed, right? You can have DAOs that have 1 million members and $50 million in the treasury after a few days, which just literally wasn't possible before, and leads to a whole host of new use cases. We all know that blockchain code is much cheaper to enforce, at least, than hiring lawyers for $800 an hour or $2,000 an hour, depending on who you choose. And since they're free to launch and reuse, and they scale as fast as the internet, why are we even here talking about legal issues, right? Can't we just put everything on chain instead? Well, unfortunately, the problem is that code is not law, despite what a lot of people like to say. And while you can enforce code automatically, it still must, using blockchains, whether it's Ethereum, Cardano, or something else, code actually has to fit into legal and regulatory frameworks to be legally binding. And that matters, right? Because we all live in countries with armies and police forces and legal systems that will throw us in jail, based on the legal implications of what we're doing, or come after us for taxes or whatever it is, irrespective of whether we tell them, but look at the code, they don't care, right? And now what the problem that we help solve with legal entities for DAOs, and I'll get into this a little bit more in a moment, is you can actually put a legal framework around your code and around your organization so that the legal systems actually know how to treat you, right? And you can manage risks, reduce risks, whether it's related to legal liability, taxes, ownership of digital or other assets, et cetera. So I just listed here, everything I could think of when it comes to legal issues that DAOs have to face. And it's the same as legal issues that everyone has to face, right? Everything from legal entities, which we'll talk more about, to all the agreements related to your organization and with other parties, issues related to money and insurance and banking and finance, property, right? Whether it's physical property or digital property, financing, securities laws, et cetera, right? So DAOs, like everyone else, need to deal with all of these issues. So let's just talk briefly, though, about what I think is one of the most core issues, which is why most DAOs at least, need legal entities. It starts with liability protection. So if a group of people engages in a common enterprise, the law, virtually if not everywhere in the world, will treat you with a default legal treatment called a general partnership, at least in Western systems called a general partnership, which means every single person involved can be held liable for the entire group's activities. So if, let's say, you own a house, right, or you own a car, whatever property you personally own, and you're involved in a DAO, and that DAO gets sued, or the government comes after you for some kind of liability, they can come after you for your house as an individual. There's no separation between your assets and the organization's assets. And that's just a legal treatment that's existed for really even over several decades, probably even centuries, is that if you don't create a legal entity and elect for a certain legal treatment, that's the default treatment. Corporate personhood, also important. Basically, that means the ability to own property, to sign contracts, right? If your DAO wants to have a booth at a trade show, right? And you want the DAO to agree to all of the terms of that contract, you need a legal entity so that it's not just you as an individual or a group of people agreeing to all those things with that other entity. Tax optimization. So just like legal liability, virtually every government in the world will come after the individual members of an organization for the full amount of taxes that organization owes, even if those individual members never saw a penny, right? So if your treasury had earnings of $1 million and there are 10 of you in the DAO, right? Each of you will be held liable by the IRS or whatever your local tax institution is for taxes on $100,000 worth of earnings. Now, the IRS and other institutions have barely even just realized DAOs exist, and that's why this hasn't happened yet. But every lawyer, every tax advisor I've ever talked to agrees that's what's going to happen. But using a legal entity, you can avoid that individual tax liability. So just to give a little bit of a graphical kind of a concept here, the legal entity kind of creates a corporate veil in between the members and all of that legal entity's activities, right? So what are examples of legal entities that anyone, DAO or otherwise, can choose between? Well, there are a lot, not to mention the fact that each jurisdiction has different definitions for what these entities mean. Right? Trust in Delaware is different from a trust in Switzerland or in an island nation, whether it's the Marshall Islands or otherwise. And then you're choosing between all these different things, right? Nonprofit, for-profit. What type of tax status do you want to elect for? Are you a foundation? Are you a LLC? Are you an association? Are you a cooperative? Are you an UNA? Or are you a trust? And what we have worked on at MyDAO is a DAO LLC. So first popularized in Wyoming in the United States. Unfortunately, the problem with Wyoming is that it's in the United States, which for most crypto projects is a non-starter right now. But that's what we've done at MyDAO is help write the laws that passed in the Marshall Islands, which is an independent nation in the South Pacific, to create this DAO LLC, which is a legal entity that's made for DAOs in the Marshall Islands, which is a sovereign nation. So the Marshall Islands has long been a popular home for shipping companies. So most people don't know this, but if you've ever been involved in boating or fishing, you've probably seen the Marshall Islands flag on a boat. And many of those boats are part of companies registered in the Marshall Islands. So we went to the Marshall Islands and said, hey, how would you like to expand your expertise beyond shipping to DAOs, this new concept? And in some ways, DAOs are similar to ships, right? They kind of live everywhere and nowhere all at the same time. So what is it about this DAO LLC that makes it different from all these other corporate types and from other jurisdictions? It's that it doesn't require you to have a board. And most legal entities, corporations and otherwise, require a board or officers or trustees. And most DAOs don't want to have a board or officers. Now, you may want to at first. Sometimes you do want to have a board in your DAO that has veto power or something like that. And if that's what you want, fine. We could debate about whether that's really a DAO or not. But if you want the ability for your DAO truly to be governed and controlled legally and on chain by the members, then you need to use a DAO LLC, or maybe there's something else like it I haven't heard of, but basically that's a DAO LLC. Similarly, most legal entities require you to keep the names and physical addresses of all the members. That's also a non-starter for most DAOs, right? For obvious reasons. That's another problem we solve with the DAO LLC in the Marshall Islands. And again, some other jurisdictions may have similar solutions. And finally, there's the issue of record keeping. So most corporate entities require you to keep paper or PDF records of meeting minutes and corporate decisions. If you're doing all that on chain, why would you want to have a separate PDF copy of all of your decisions, right? So all of this are these things and more are things that we've written into legislation in the Marshall Islands and that some other jurisdictions may be working on. But to my knowledge, we're the only sovereign nation that has actually passed DAO-specific legislation. So just a couple of graphics to give you a sense of how are these entities actually used in practice. And often you have this scenario where you have, let's say, our MyDAO DAO LLC, which is the DAO that does governance and maybe supports a certain dApp or protocol, right, and builds it. But that dApp still is separate, right? That's just open source software living on the blockchain where people are interacting directly with each other. And the DAO is there for the community to govern that system. And maybe those members are even making money somehow, by directly interacting with the protocol or the dApp. but that doesn't mean that the DAO is making money necessarily off of those interactions. And so often you can use a nonprofit for your DAO. Here's another really common structure is that you'll have your governance DAO here again at the top, and then some other kind of traditional incorporated entity. Like if you're a US group of developers, often it's a Delaware C Corp. So you have your DAO, which is for the entire community. You have your Delaware C Corp, which is like your OpCo or your DevCo. There's a lot of different things people do. I mean, sometimes you see like Marshall Islands and maybe a BVI entity for specific purposes, and a Delaware C Corp or a Swiss association, or whatever, wherever the main contributors are. You may have legal entities as well. So I'll leave it at that. Obviously, please feel free to reach out. My podcast, Just DAO It. My colleague Jana also does workshops. We call them master classes on Just DAO It, where she digs into legal issues with Web3 lawyers. We have a partner network of over 300 Web3 lawyers. There's no cost. If you want to talk to one of these lawyers, reach out and we can help you get connected with the right lawyer for your needs. Often they'll give you a free 30-minute consultation as well, just to see if you do have needs that they can help solve in the first place. And here's my Twitter, 0xThriller. My Farcaster, for anyone who's on Web3 Social, is the Thriller. Thanks so much for the opportunity to teach this brief class, and please reach out with any questions. Thanks.